it's a real pleasure and a real honour, really, to talk to the New Zealand Government Leadership Integrity Forum that TI New Zealand holds about the Corruption Perceptions Index, because it is the world's biggest and most widely cited indicator of how the largest number of countries, 180 countries, are travelling compared to one another in terms of control of public sector corruption. It's a really important index. It's not data that Transparency International collects itself. That's one of its beauties. We put it together from 13 or up to 13 different surveys and independent sources, from the World Economic Forum to the World Justice Project to a whole range of different reliable, reputable sources, and the result is the single biggest snapshot of what's happening all around the world. So it's a really important index. The key news, of course, is that New Zealand, whereas it has been equal first in recent years, has slipped a number of points and is now only third on the index. Now, you might think that still sounds really high, but one of the things that I talked about with the Leadership Integrity Forum was the fact that Australia used to be eighth, and it slipped a little bit, and we thought, oh, well, that's not too much of a problem, but it ended up slipping from 8th to 18th, and now it's flicked back again a little bit, and we're hoping that it's turned the corner. But even as all slides begin somewhere, and it's really important that New Zealand regards this as a little bit of a wake-up call against any sort of complacency in terms of controlling corruption and fighting corruption and ensuring public integrity, because quite a number of countries have been on a slippery slope, and sometimes that slope can be quite steep and indicate that countries, unbeknownst to themselves, are travelling in a direction that they probably never thought that they could travel in. We know from the measure itself that's what's driven the New Zealand's drop is a particular measure that's a survey that's run by the World Economic Forum Executive Opinion Survey, which is influenced by judgments of how much bribery is going on, public sector bribery is going on in the country, but also diversion of public funds. So things like conflicts of interest or procurement practices where corners get cut, or undue influence, people getting cosy sweetheart deals out of government, are the types of things that could well be driving that sentiment. And it is a risk for all small countries in particular. It's a risk for any country, but it is a risk for smaller countries like New Zealand, where there can be cosy relationships between major companies and government that mean that corners are being cut or could be cut, and so that may be a warning shot in terms of there being less tolerance of that internationally amongst experts and the business community. People really expect robust decision-making systems. So smaller countries can fall prey to that, and that may be an indicator. But I think we know from other countries apart from New Zealand, Australia's slide or Canada's slide, quite a number of developed, and we talked about this with the Leadership Integrity Forum, quite a number of developed countries that have got robust democratic systems that are at the top, higher end of the index, have been suffering a similar sort of slide, because we think of the fact that we've generally taken it for granted that we've got everything under control, when in fact the expectations of the community and of experts and of the business community has in fact been firming up that we need to do more to fight corruption, and particularly when it comes to things like undue influence, lobbying, how decisions are made behind closed doors, the transparency of decisions, political finance, political donations, and the control of political donations and their transparency is a big issue that feeds into lots of people's calculation as to whether the system is really properly insulated against corruption, because corruption isn't just, at the level of everyday officials, bribes of parking inspectors or whatever. It's the more serious type of corruption is at the big end of politics and the big end of town. And I think what we're seeing across a number of developed countries is an awareness that even advanced democracies can fall prey to that sort of our own form of state capture, if you like, and that constitutes corruption and at the sort of the grand corruption end of things, and those issues are really important ones to be attending to, which perhaps in the past we just assumed that our advanced democratic system had all of those issues under control. And I think it's excellent that TI New Zealand has established and conducts the Leadership Integrity Forum across the New Zealand public sector with really high level officials. Today's forum was chaired by the Auditor General, John Ryan. I think it's really, really important because we know that it's senior officials who really do set the tone, who can advise government on reforms, who really certainly set the tone for their own agency, absolutely, and will determine whether good integrity and anti-corruption practices are occurring within their own agency or not. But also, more importantly, as a collective, public sector leaders can advise government on what they should be doing, and to some degree are our backstop. It's true in Australia as well, that if governments themselves at a political level aren't seeing the long term or aren't seeing the risks that the country is facing, then we really are dependent on our senior public sector leaders to really lay those out for the elected government of the day and for the parliament. So I think it's great, and it's really one of the things that Transparency International in many different countries we pride ourselves on is being able to work very closely with government as well as with business and other stakeholders to have these sorts of conversations about what's really going on in order to help stimulate that thinking about, well, what could be done better and how do we either put it into place or advise government on what needs to be put into place.